Okay, so the floor is yours, Alyssa and Hannah. And I know it might take a moment here for the PowerPoint to load up. And if people want to move a little bit closer, feel free to do that. Courtney, if you want to scooch up, we'll try to make this available on our website as well.
Okay, can you folks see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So again, my name is Alyssa McLaughlin. Me and Hannah Herenjik both worked together this past summer. We did a couple different watersheds. We started with Gingrich, and then we moved on to Killinger. We actually got done earlier than expected, so we also did Snitz Creek as well. And that was the summer of 2023.
So the main part of our internship was doing stream morphology, and we were trained by Powell to recognize and document the stream bank and stream bed erosion. And then we recorded this and other information on reconnaissance survey forms. Some of the other information we recorded was surrounding land use, the macroinvertebrate community, how clear the channel was, and the dimensions of the channels for pools and ripples. And also with this project, we worked with the Lebanon Valley Conservancy to record best management practices, BMPs for farmers to receive credit and acknowledgement for working to keep the pollution out of the stream.
So the materials that we used, we had two surveyors tape. The one was 100 foot, and then a longer one that we used for buffers measurements was 300 foot. And then we had a stake that we could put on one end so we could carry the other end across the creek. We also had a survey rod, which we use frequently to measure the height of bank erosion. We use that a lot in our pictures just to show how high the banks were. We also had, we were working on a reconnaissance surveys. So we had separate surveys, sheets for each reach. And then we also had an information packet that was provided to us by Rocky. Just kind of like a vague overview of just a reminder of different things we were looking for and what to classify them as. And then it also had macroinvertebrate identification, so we could identify those in the streams.
So the first stream we did was Gingrich, and we created aerial maps on Google Earth, which is like on the right of the whole watershed and the stream. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of the more notable areas were the first reach. It had extreme stream bank and stream bed erosion, as you can see in the first picture. It's kind of hard to see, but the gully is really deep. And like you can like stand in them. There's also a breached dam, which is kind of like the middlemost picture. You can kind of see the concrete above the grass there. That was in really bad shape, and there had similar conditions throughout the entire property for this section. And also in Reach 2C, there was livestock access to the creek, which created a lot of bank erosion, and the grass was cut and grazed very shortly. Next slide, please. My apologies of how like long silence. My screen's having some issues. So for Reach 2D in this section, there was earthen berms installed on the property in 2017, and this was done against the advice from the Conservation District. There's also stream bank erosion. If you can kind of see in the top picture, what I'm standing on is like a shelf. So the stream is down below, and there's the shelf, and then there's the earthen berm. So that, and then there's also a lot of lateral and mid-channel bars. And for reaches 5, 6, and 7, there were a lot of sinkholes and there was no flow observed. If you look at like the picture on the bottom right, there's a little like sinkhole underneath what was the bank and a fallen log, and that's where most of the water was going into, but there were also several others. A lot of landowners expressed interest in wondering if something could be done to restore the flow to the creek. And there was only water in these channels after it rained. And there's a lot of stream bank erosion along this section as well. And then we're going to move on to Gingrich Creek. So again, we also made the aerial maps for this one as well. You can see it kind of finishes up by the 4 mark. Next slide, please. So the notable areas for this one is again in Reach 1A. There was really high bank heights on the eroding banks and bends. The rest of the stream was in really good condition. So it appears that there is a lot of water moving through this section during like extreme storm events. If you see in the top picture, the top right picture, you can see me holding a survey rod for like scale. They were very steep. And then the picture on the bottom right is again me holding up the survey rod, and you can see how tall like the top of the bank is. Another section that was particularly bad was Reach 1B and 2C. It's the same landowner who grants cattle access to their creek. So there was a lot of sections like in the middle picture where there was almost like no bank and it was just water moving through like trampled grass and mud. And then there was also sections like at the bottom left corner where there is some stream bank erosion, and there was also several sections of the banks that were actively sliding into the creek. Next slide, please.
Really?
So some more notable areas were in Reach 4C. So the township water treatment plant discharge that went into the creek. There was a lot of bubbles when we walked through, and there was also a very overwhelming smell of chlorine. And then in Reach 7B and 8, there were a lot of concrete flumes with holes and broken sections. In our report, we have the individual measurements of these flumes, with their width and length and height. There was also several sinkholes moving through this area as well. As you can see on the bottom, on the right, the top, that's the water moving past the water treatment plant. You can't really see the bubbles from here, but there's a couple close to the grass. And on the right on the bottom, you can see the biggest sinkhole we found. I'm kind of standing near it, and you can see how it's just eating the entire creek. And then in the middle picture, there is on one of the concrete flumes has like broken, and the water, when there is water in these channels, it's moving through the holes in the side of the concrete flume and into this large pit, creating a lot of erosion. And on the bottom left, you can see like a pit of grass that was, from like an aerial point of view, you can see how it's sunken in kind of like a sinkhole. And so the water in this section doesn't start back up until it hits the municipal wastewater treatment plant later on. And that most of the water comes from The water does backflow into one of these concrete channels, but it mostly just moves forward. Next slide.
So next we did Snitz Creek. This one was larger than the other two creeks. So some notable areas here was starting off with Reach 7, which is the picture on the top right. There were many large fallen trees that were blocking the channel and causing these huge diversions like you can see here. It's a little hard to see from a picture, but the creek is actually splitting into two here just because of all the logs that are falling into it.
Yes,
So this
there we
resulted
go.
in
Okay, now we can see it. Yep.
Good. Good. Go ahead, please.
So this resulted in mid-channel bars and eroding banks. I apologize. I think my internet's a little slow, so that's probably why it's loading a little slowly. But the picture on the top right is the one I was talking about. And then Reach 11A and 11B. These showed severe bank erosion with a failing dam as well as active head cuts. So both the pictures on the bottom left are the same head cut. One's just looking upstream, and then the other one's looking downstream. So you can just see how severe that head cut is. It was almost 5 foot. And then it's pretty wide as well, and just rooting underneath all those trees that aren't just providing any support. So we did provide a lot of information about that in a summary, just exactly where it's located and so on. And then the picture on the bottom right is actually a failing dam. So it's hard to see, but there's a concrete dam on the left of that picture. And then on the right, you can see how the water is going around the edge of it and just eroding that right bank. So we took a lot of pictures of that too.
Mhm.
I moved on to my next slide. It might take a minute for you to see it. But the next ones were reaches 13B, 14, and 15. So all these were right after each other. And this one had a lot of eroding banks as well along the majority of all of these reaches. And there was frequent leaning and falling trees creating blockages. So on the picture on the top right, you can see a tree that has fallen into the creek, and it just resulted in the buildup of smaller and smaller branches. And the bank is eroding like out around it to the left. So water is just trying to go around that blockage. And then the picture on the bottom left, you can see just another eroding bank. And the trees are starting to fall into the creek as the roots aren't holding the bank up anymore. And then a picture, middle picture on the right, you can just see an outer bend that also has some erosion around the roots. And then the picture on the very bottom right is an abandoned bridge. I think it's an old railroad bridge that is, it's made of brick and stone, and it's currently collapsing into the stream. So if that continues, obviously it's going to create a pretty significant blockage. So we took some pictures and made some notes of that as well. And then lastly, I have some pictures from reaches 19 through 22. This was towards the end of the creek. And this section was very unstable with the bank erosion from ranging between 75 to 80% of the entire reach. There was a lot of high banks as well as undercut banks. So the picture on the bottom left was a dam that we came across. It was a little hard to get a picture of because there was a bridge across just right underneath of it. But they also had a water withdrawal structure there. So they had a pump that was currently pumping water out of the stream and going into some kind of wetland feature. Wasn't sure exactly what. And there were also a lot of stone walls that people had placed to try and prevent erosion. But they just made the sides of the banks very high due to that. And then you can see two pictures here of livestock. This was on the Miller property, I believe. They had the livestock fence right up to the edge. And then at some point, they actually had the fence growing across the creek and onto the next bank. So you can see how much wider the creek is in that area due to the livestock impacts of being able to access the creek directly. And then the picture on the top right, you can see the aggregation that's in the stream bed. It was some pretty deep mud in that area. And then the picture on the bottom right is just the outer bend And you can see how eroded the bank is there. So that was pretty typical of what we saw in that area. Just a lot of steep eroded banks. And then lastly, I have my conclusion slide.
So we'd like to thank the Quotable Watershed Association for this opportunity, as well as the Lebanon Valley Conservation District and the Lebanon Valley Conservancy for their help and involvement.
All right. Wow, that's pretty troubling.
It is, I was just thinking as we went through this thing, Alyssa, Hannah, we've done a lot of stream improvement work in the watershed. And boy, we have a lot more to go. Don't
Boy, do we.
Let's go back to that slide 18, 19 through 22 on Snitz Creek. It might be the next to the last slide. Can we go back, or is it difficult?
I did just go back. It might take a second for you folks to see
Well,
it.
Yep,
That's good.
right there, yeah.
The question is, that looks pretty bad. The question is that upstream from Walnut Street, upstream from the Wingert Dairy?
Yes, it's upstream from the dairy. The dairy was reached 23, I think. So this was just before that.
Okay, thank you.
And it's reached, I think on Snitz, it's 1819 that is behind the lows that we were stuck on. So this is, I think, right in that same area
Okay,
that runs parallel to Quentin Road, 72.
okay.
And it looks like it's not just on the upper reaches where it's relatively steep and where these tributaries begin. And one would kind of expect, because there's no human habitation there. And it just, when, heavy rainfall events occur, it just erodes these gullies. But it sounds like it's not just on the hillsides, but then once it gets down into the valley, it also, as it runs through farms and so on, it also, there is severe erosion and livestock access and a whole slew of issues that need addressing. Is that fair?
Yes, there's different reasons for erosion upstream versus downstream. But there was definitely erosion throughout the entire creek, just for different reasons, which we tried to make note of the best that we could.
That 5-foot bank was really disturbing to see that. I had no clue that's happening in the watershed. Boy, I'm surprised.
Yeah.
You can see there's a lot of sediment and erosion coming from the banks. And one would wonder whether bank erosion is a major issue compared to crop field erosion. And if indeed it is bank erosion, then our work to stabilize stream banks and do stream restoration projects is really spot on.
How many photographs would you estimate you took over the course of the entire summer?
Between all three streams, I think I took close to 3,000 altogether. Yeah.
3,000 photo. And so what is going to happen with all the data and the photographs and all the materials that you collected over the course of the summer? What's the next step?
So me and Hannah both made reports of all of the streams, which we had Rocky look over, and we just have to finalize a couple changes, and then we'll be handing them in to you. And then which have the summary sheets as well as the pictures on them. And then I also took a flash drive and uploaded all the pictures onto that and gave that to Rocky also. So if anybody wanted to see the pictures like up close and in their original format, that they could do so.
Okay, great. So I can get a hold of Rocky and we can figure out some kind of a cloud storage access way to get access to those.
Yeah, I'm sure he could do that for you. If not, I do still have the pictures on my computer, and I could make you another flash drive.
That would be really helpful. I would appreciate that.
Okay.
If that's not too much trouble.
Yeah,
Or,
I could do that.
or to upload them into like a shared, into the cloud and just provide access, one or the other, be great.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions for our,
Yes, please. Hannah, this is Kent. On your opening slide, or maybe the second slide, you talked about having resources for macroinvertebrate identification. Did you do any of that?
We did some. During every reach, we would stop during a ripple section and we'd look for different macroinvertebrates. Rocky provided us a guide that we could go through to identify them. We mostly found like crayfish, water pennies, and caddisflies.
Okay, so there was no recording of the information you found. It was just for your own information.
No, we recorded it in the summary sheets. They're in our reports.
Thank you.
great, other questions?
I just have a question. I'm relatively new to the area, so but did I understand you correctly to say that at some points the streams were just going into sinkholes? And is that pretty common in streams around?
Both Gingrich and Killinger ended in the stream moving into sinkholes. I'm not sure if that's the same for other tributaries in the area, but 2 out of 3 of the streams we looked at did.
And they just get swallowed up, and then, so is there really a solution then? Like if a landowner says, I want to be able to resurface this stream, there's really no way to plug those holes, is there?
Well,
I wouldn't know, I don't know myself. We were hoping if we put it in the report, if there was a way, somebody could look and find it, but we talked with Rocky and he said there's not any way that could be fixable. But we just wanted to make note that the landowners were concerned.
Yeah, okay, great. Other questions? Okay, again, well, thank you so much. I'm gonna stop the recording here. If I can, let's see.
Thank you, Alyssa.